Faye Collier was already 3 minutes late when she hit the cobblestones on Broughton Street, her old bicycle rattling against the bricks as if staging its own personal protest. "Settle down, Winnie," she muttered, standing on the pedals to build speed. "I know you hate the bricks, we're almost there." Winnie was a 12-year-old delivery bike with a dented rear fender, a bell that worked every third press, and a temperament Faye described as aggressively opinionated. She had inherited the bicycle from her uncle, named it on a whim, and now held full conversations with it during the morning rush. In Savannah's historic district, nobody looked twice. She was 28 years old. She had been working double shifts at her family's diner, the Copper Kettle, since she was 17. She made deliveries on the side, lunch orders, mostly, because the diner barely cleared its monthly costs, and Faye had learned long ago that dreams required more than good intentions. Her dream was specific: a cooperative of independent food workers in Savannah, local vendors and delivery couriers with real health benefits, real days off, and a pension that wasn't a joke. She had a notebook full of research. She just needed about $40,000 more than she currently had. She parked Winnie outside Castellan Jewelers, locked the bike to a signpost, and walked through the glass door carrying the lunch order for the store's floor manager. That was when she heard it. "If you need help understanding our pricing structure, perhaps a different kind of establishment would suit your situation better." The voice belonged to Portia. Faye would learn the name later, embroidered on a name badge in gold thread, a woman in a charcoal blazer standing behind a glass display case with her arms crossed and her chin lifted at an angle that seemed anatomically deliberate. In front of her, separated by 3 feet of polished marble, stood an elderly woman in a pale blue wool coat. Simply cut, no jewelry. She was holding a velvet tray with a single pearl necklace resting on it, turning it slowly in her gloved hands, examining the piece with quiet care. The elderly woman didn't respond. She went still in the way that certain people do, not from weakness, but from the effort of choosing not to say what they actually thought. Faye set the lunch bag on the counter. "Forgive me," she said, loud enough that the couple near the bracelet display turned their heads. "Was that a customer service script, or do you write your own material?" Portia blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm asking genuinely, because that sentence you just used, I haven't heard phrasing quite like it since I failed a customer relations quiz in community college, and I failed on purpose." Portia's expression compressed into something narrow and controlled. "This doesn't concern you. You're a delivery person." "I'm a delivery person who can read a room." Faye walked to the display case, unhurried, and turned toward the elderly woman. "Were you finding what you needed, ma'am?" The elderly woman looked up. She had pale gray eyes and the kind of face that suggested she had once been formidably beautiful and had since upgraded to formidably composed. A small smile crossed her mouth. "I was taking my time about it." "Nothing wrong with that." Faye looked back at Portia. "It's called deliberate shopping. Some people do it when they're spending real money." A woman near the ring counter whispered something to her companion. "This necklace." Faye nodded toward the pearl strand on the velvet tray. "The luster is exceptional, a Koya if I had to guess. The overtone is rare, that's not pink, that's rose silver." She glanced at the elderly woman. "If you're comparing it to another strand, ask to see them side by side under the store light and then near the window. Different settings change everything with pearls." The elderly woman studied her for a moment. "You know jewelry?" "I know pearls. My grandmother had a strand she wore every Sunday. I used to study them." Faye shrugged. "Occupational curiosity. I study everything." Portia had moved through several unpleasant expressions and settled, finally, on a thin professional smile that communicated nothing warm. "Your order is at the back counter," she said. "In a minute." Faye spent the next several minutes with the elderly woman, whose name she would find out later was Florence Whitmore, holding the necklace strands near the window, comparing the light, discussing clasp styles and care. When Florence pointed to the first strand and said simply, "This one," Portia was reorganizing ring trays with aggressive precision. "Thank you," Florence said as Faye retrieved her lunch bag. "That was unexpected." "Good unexpected, I hope." "The best kind." The elderly woman held her gaze for a moment. "What's your name?" "Faye Collier, Copper Kettle on Montgomery, the diner with the blue awning." Florence read the embroidery on the insulated bag. "Copper Kettle, home cooking worth the wait." She kept it in mind. That same evening, in a home on Abercorn Street with high ceilings and oil paintings in the hallway, Florence set down her fork and told her son everything. The store, the saleswoman, the lunchbox on the counter, the girl who had walked in with the confidence of someone twice her age. Knox Whitmore listened without interrupting. He was 34, broad-shouldered, and had been told by more than one business publication that he had excellent instincts. He set down his water glass. "I want to call the store," he said. "You will do no such thing." "Mom, that girl didn't say a word on my behalf so that you could spend 10 minutes throwing our name around." Florence looked at him the way she had been looking at him since he was 9 and convinced of something wrong. "I want to meet her properly, as a person." Knox opened his mouth. Florence raised one finger. He closed it again. The next morning at the Copper Kettle, the diner smelled of strong coffee and cinnamon when the letter arrived. A man in a business suit walked in at 9:15, set a sealed envelope on the counter in front of Faye's father, and left without ordering anything. Faye opened the envelope in the storage room, between the dry goods shelves and the spare coffee filters. The word defamation jumped off the page before she finished the first paragraph. The owner of Castellan Jewelers was claiming $40,000 in damages to the store's professional reputation. $40,000. The Copper Kettle's monthly profit, on a good month, covered rent, utilities, and approximately one modest emergency. There was no version of this math that ended well. "You did what was right," her father said from the doorway. His voice was steady, his hands were not. Faye stared at the old coffee maker on the shelf. "You got any thoughts on this?" she asked it. The machine dripped once into the pot. "Helpful as always," she said, pushed her hair back, and started counting options on her fingers. She was still counting when the front bell rang. 2 days later, Florence Whitmore appeared at the diner door in a cream-colored coat, looking around the dining room with genuine attention, the way people do when they are actually seeing a place rather than just entering it. "I came to thank you in person," she announced. The words stopped short when she saw the letter on the counter and Faye's father's expression beside it. Florence asked 3 direct questions. She got the whole story. Her face went very still. Then she stepped outside, phone already in hand, and made a call Faye couldn't hear through the window. She came back in 2 minutes, smoothed her coat, and ordered a slice of apple pie. "You have an excellent reputation in this neighborhood," she said, as Faye poured her coffee. "I intend to come back." She left a $20 tip on a $4 slice of pie and did not explain the phone call. The lawsuit was dropped the following morning. No explanation, no correspondence, just a brief message saying the matter had been resolved internally. Faye stood in the storage room again, staring at the same coffee maker. $40,000 disappears overnight and everyone acts like it's normal, she told it. The machine dripped. I know. Something's off. That afternoon, a man came into the Copper Kettle and sat at the counter. He was wearing a plain gray Henley, dark jeans, and sunglasses he didn't take off even after sitting down inside. He ordered coffee and the Tuesday special and looked around the diner with the relaxed interest of someone working hard to appear relaxed. "I'm here on behalf of my mother," he said when Faye set down his plate. "She was at Castellan Jewelers last week. She hasn't stopped talking about what you did." Faye frowned. She had 3 tables waiting and the Tuesday special was already running low. "Tell her she's welcome," she said, and turned back toward the kitchen. "My name is Knox," he added. "I'm a freelance photographer, covering small businesses in the historic district." "Great." She was already moving. "The light in here is terrible, and the chairs have had a complicated relationship with their back legs for 3 years, so photograph accordingly." Knox watched her cross the room, redirect a new customer to a table, catch a napkin holder before it fell, and take 2 orders simultaneously without writing anything down. He ate his Tuesday special, left a good tip, came back the next day. And the day after that. He started helping with deliveries on the 3rd visit, presenting it as casual, as if he'd just thought of it. Faye handed him a delivery bag with the skepticism of someone who had been surprised before and didn't enjoy it. "You ever delivered food?" "I've sent a lot of food," Knox said. "That's related." "It's completely different." She was right. The first stop required navigating a neighborhood she'd done 100 times, and Knox spent most of it a half block behind her, slightly uncertain of every surface. The second delivery involved 3 flights of stairs and a bag heavier than it looked. The third required negotiating with an elderly woman named Hester, who would not hand over the signed receipt until Knox had complimented her cat in specific and sincere terms. "Did you know the cat?" Faye asked as they walked back down. "I knew I needed him to like me," Knox said. Neither of them had planned the routine that followed. After the afternoon deliveries, they sat on the back steps of whatever building they'd just finished, splitting a to-go container from the copper kettle, while the city went about its business around them. Knox asked questions like someone genuinely curious about the answers. Faye talked about the cooperative idea, the notebook full of research, the precise dollar amount she still needed. "Why hasn't anyone started something like that here?" Knox asked one afternoon, his coffee balanced on his knee. "Because the people with capital don't work delivery jobs," Faye said, "and the people who work delivery jobs don't have capital." "Pretty standard arrangement," she nudged his shoulder with hers. "What about you? What does a freelance photographer lose sleep over?" He turned the question over before answering. "Being surrounded by people who are only there for what I can provide. Waking up one day and realizing I couldn't name a single person who knew me without some kind of prior calculation." Faye looked at him for a long moment. "That's heavy for a Tuesday," she said finally. "I contain multitudes." She laughed, and the afternoon moved on, and neither of them noticed how quickly it had passed. One evening, caught under an awning on Bull Street when the summer rain arrived without notice, they stood shoulder to shoulder watching the water sheet off the awning's edge, and neither of them had anything particular to say. Knox started to say something anyway. Faye turned toward him at the same moment. A door opened directly behind them, and a man in a bathrobe stared at both of them with the expression of someone who had seen enough of the world to stop being impressed by any of it. "Y'all need something," he said, "or did you just pick my stoop?" "Just the stoop, sir," Faye said immediately. "We're going." They walked back through the light drizzle, laughing in the way people laugh when they are embarrassed, and relieved in equal measure. Neither of them mentioned what hadn't quite happened under the awning. Neither of them forgot it. Claudia Fairfax had been watching Knox's pattern for 11 days before the envelope arrived. She had ended things with Knox 14 months ago, or rather, he had ended things with her, which she had chosen to remember differently. The photographs were taken by someone she paid to be discreet. What she found in them was not what she expected. Not another socialite, not a business merger disguised as dinner. A diner, a delivery bicycle, a girl in a copper kettle apron eating lunch on a back step. Claudia stared at the photographs for a long time. Then she made a reservation at a private dining room downtown, under the charitable foundation she chaired. She requested catering from a specific list of local vendors. She included the copper kettle. She specified the delivery be made by Faye Collier personally. Faye arrived with the order at 11:40 on a Wednesday. The room was full of women in linen, and Claudia Fairfax was at the center of the table, waiting with the patience of someone who had rehearsed. "I'm so glad you came in person," Claudia said. "I've heard so much about you." She gestured to the AV booth at the far end of the room. The screen lit up. Knox at a board meeting. Knox at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Knox shaking hands with the mayor, standing next to Florence at a foundation gala, the words Whitmore Investment Group in raised gold letters behind them. Faye's chest went cold. "The man you've been spending your afternoons with," Claudia said pleasantly, "happens to own $800 million in commercial real estate and sits on 3 state economic boards. He's been playing at the simple life with you, a little vacation from reality." She tilted her head. "Did you really not know?" The room had gone entirely silent. Faye looked at the projection. Knox in a charcoal suit. Knox at a podium. Knox looking exactly like the man she had been sitting on back steps with, splitting containers of rice, arguing about the best delivery route on Taylor Street. She looked at the bag in her hands. "Here's your order," she said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "Everything's labeled." She walked the length of the room without looking at anyone. She made it to the street before her steps became fast, and to the copper kettle before they stopped. Knox was outside. He had taken Winnie from the rack, apparently, and was leaning against the signpost with the expression of a man who already knew something had gone wrong. "How much of it was real?" Faye said. "All of it." "That's what someone says when none of it was." Her voice was starting to shake, and she was furious about that. "You let me talk to you about the cooperative, about money, about what it's like to not have enough of it, and the whole time you were—" She stopped, started again. "You were $800 million the whole time, Knox. I was going to tell you." "When?" He didn't answer fast enough. "Get out of my diner," Faye said. She walked in. Her mother, who had heard enough through the kitchen pass-through to understand the general shape of the situation, emerged from the back with a dishcloth and threw it squarely at Knox's shoulder. "Go on," she said, not unkindly, but without any softness either. "Come back when you've thought about what honesty actually requires." Knox left. He walked 3 blocks before he stopped on a sidewalk and looked at nothing specific for a while. The next 3 days brought 2 unannounced health inspections, a noise complaint filed against the diner by an anonymous source, and a video that appeared online, an edited clip from Castellan Jewelers with the audio cut before Portia's comment, reframed to look like Faye was confronting a quiet elderly woman unprovoked. The comments multiplied, orders were cancelled. A man who had eaten at the Copper Kettle every Thursday for 6 years walked past the window without coming in. "We built this place," Faye's mother said that evening, sitting on a stool in the kitchen. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. On the 4th day, it rained in the afternoon, the kind of Savannah summer rain that appears without warning and means serious business. Winnie's rear tire blew out on Whitaker Street with a sound like a small argument being settled badly. Faye sat down on the wet curb beside the bicycle, leaned her back against the brick wall of a hardware store, and let the rain do what it wanted. The delivery bag was still on her back. It had stopped mattering for a moment. The whole thing had stopped mattering for a moment. She heard footsteps. She looked up expecting no one in particular and found Knox. He was wearing a yellow rain jacket that was 2 inches too short at the wrists and had clearly come from a gas station convenience rack. Under it, a dress shirt. He was holding an umbrella over her head that the wind was testing aggressively. Faye looked at the jacket, that color. It was all they had. You wore a gas station rain jacket over a good shirt. The occasion seemed to call for it. She looked at the blown tire. He crouched beside it without being asked. "Do you have a patch kit?" "In the seat bag. You don't know how to fix a flat." "I know it conceptually. You're going to tell me what to do." "I am absolutely not." "Faye." She looked at him for a long moment. Rain ran down the back of the umbrella in a thin, steady curtain. "Tire levers are in the red pouch," she said. He worked slowly, following her instructions, getting it wrong twice before getting it approximately right, his hands going dark with grime from the inner tube. At one point the lever slipped and skittered into a puddle, and he retrieved it without complaint, without making a face, without remarking on the state of his shirt. When the wheel was finally back on, and the tire held pressure, he sat down on the wet curb beside her and leaned his back against the same wall. "Why did you hide it?" Faye asked. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired in the particular way that arrives after anger burns through. "Because every time I walked into a room as Knox Whitmore," he said, "I couldn't tell who was actually glad to see me and who was glad to see the name. And then I walked into your diner and you handed me a menu and told me the Tuesday special was almost gone and looked at me like I was just a person." He studied his dirty hands. "And I kept coming back because of that. I should have told you before anyone else had the chance to." "Yes," she said, "you should have." "I know." A puddle near the curb reflected a slow-moving cloud. The rain had started to ease. "I'm not interested in your money," Faye said finally. "I never was. The problem wasn't that you were rich. The problem was that you thought you had to lie for me to like you." She paused. "And I liked you. That's why I was so angry." Knox looked at her. "I liked you the whole time," she said. "You didn't have to earn it." Florence Whitmore had been making preparations for 3 days. She had a specific event in mind, the Whitmore Foundation annual luncheon, held every summer at the DeSoto Hotel, attended by every civic leader and philanthropist in the region. She had seen the online video. She had also heard, from sources she trusted, exactly who had funded the health inspections. She called Claudia Fairfax directly. "Claudia, dear," she said, her voice warm and unhurried. "I've seen that terrible video. I'd like to make a statement at the foundation luncheon on Friday, in front of everyone who matters in this city." Claudia heard statement and everyone who matters and smiled. "Of course," she said. "I'll make sure you have the podium." "Wonderful." Florence looked at her reflection in the hall mirror after she hung up. "You really should have chosen better targets," she told the reflection and went to make tea. The Whitmore Foundation luncheon filled the DeSoto ballroom with tall centerpieces, white tablecloths, and the kind of table settings that required a diagram. Claudia had taken 2 hours getting ready. She had chosen a dress that photographed well. She was already at the podium, moving through the program with practiced ease, when Knox arrived with Faye beside him. Faye was wearing a green silk dress she had found at a resale boutique on Price Street for $14. When she had stepped out of the dressing room in it, Knox had gone quiet for a moment that lasted slightly too long. "You're staring," she'd said. "I'm aware. It's embarrassing." "Then I'll be embarrassed," he'd said, and she'd straightened his tie on the way to the car, and told him that if this went sideways she was holding him personally responsible. Claudia spotted them from the podium. She signaled to 2 hotel staff. They moved toward the aisle. Knox took Faye's hand and walked through the room without accelerating, stopping to greet the people he knew until they were seated. The staff retreated. Claudia paused for effect, then she gestured to the AV booth. The edited clip, the jewelry store footage, Faye moving toward Florence, context-stripped, audio missing. "The reputation of this foundation," Claudia said, "depends on protecting those who cannot protect themselves. This woman—" "Excuse me." Florence Whitmore's voice, from her seat at the head table, was not loud. It didn't need to be. The quality of it, precise, unhurried, carrying decades of decisions that had gone the way she intended, stopped conversation at every table within range. She stood. She walked to the podium with the steadiness of someone who had decided this several days ago and had no intention of being rushed. "The only person in this room who needs any protecting," Florence said, "is the young woman being lied about." Claudia turned. Her expression changed slowly, which was worse than if it had changed quickly. "Florence, I only meant to." "I was there." Florence reached the podium. "I was in that store. I am, in fact, the elderly woman in that footage." She looked across the room. "Let me show everyone what actually happened." She nodded to the AV booth. The full, unedited security footage from Castellan Jewelers filled the screen. Portia's original comment, Faye setting down the lunch bag, every word of the exchange in sequence with full audio. The room watched in silence. When it ended, the murmuring that followed was different in quality from before. Claudia stepped back from the podium. Her heel caught the base of a tall floral arrangement stand near the dessert service cart. She reached behind her for the table edge and found only the corner of the cart itself, which rolled slightly under her weight, and which was carrying a 4-tier champagne cake prepared for the dessert reception. She went down slowly and then all at once. The top 3 tiers came with her. The room produced the specific collective sound of 140 people who had all just witnessed the same unexpected thing simultaneously. Claudia sat up on the ballroom floor with champagne frosting across one shoulder and most of her carefully arranged hair. A nearby waiter turned his face professionally to the side. Faye stood up from her seat, walked over, and offered Claudia a folded cloth napkin. Claudia took it without a word. Knox walked to the podium and looked out at the room. "Most of you know the Whitmore name in a financial context," he said. "What I want to tell you tonight is that the most meaningful thing I've witnessed in this city in recent memory was done by a woman who makes food deliveries by bicycle and has never once asked for anything in return." He found Faye across the room without difficulty. She walked into a store and defended a stranger, not because it was strategic, not because she knew it would lead anywhere, because she saw something wrong and decided she was the one to say something. The applause started near the front and built until it had covered the room. Later, when most of the crowd had left and the ballroom lights had lowered to something softer, Knox found Faye on the hotel's side terrace looking out at Forsyth Park below. The park lights filtered through Spanish moss in long, slow patterns. "You doing okay?" he asked. "I think so," she exhaled slowly. "That was a lot of room for one evening." He stood beside her. After a moment, he reached into his jacket pocket and set something small on the railing near her hand. A ring, plain gold band, simple pale stone, clean and uncluttered. Faye looked at it without touching it. "I'm not proposing on a hotel terrace," Knox said. "I wanted you to see it first, because I think you should have been the first to see everything from the beginning, and you weren't. This time I want to get the order right." She looked at him. "Come on," he said. "I have somewhere specific in mind." He had arranged for Winnie to be brought to the hotel. The bicycle was parked outside the employee entrance under the glow of a side streetlight with a yellow ribbon, the exact yellow of his terrible gas station rain jacket, tied to the handlebars. Florence had suggested the ribbon. Florence was almost never wrong about these things. Faye saw the bicycle before she saw anything else. She laughed before Knox could say a word. "You had her transported here?" With care, she was treated respectfully the entire time. Faye touched the ribbon on the handlebar. Then she turned around and found Knox already on one knee on the sidewalk. in a suit that had been to a luncheon and an emergency and was still more or less intact. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who knew every number attached to my name and nothing else about me," he said. "And then I met someone who told me my sunglasses were ridiculous, declared me a liability on a delivery route, and made me fix a bicycle tire in a rainstorm while providing verbal criticism the entire time. I don't want to stop being around that person." He paused. "I also think your cooperative is an excellent idea, and I've been wanting to say that honestly for 6 weeks." Faye covered her mouth with both hands. "Will you marry me?" The silence lasted 1 second. "Only if Winnie's at the wedding," she said. "Winnie is already on the guest list." She was still laughing when he slid the ring onto her finger, both of them standing on a Savannah sidewalk at 10:30 at night with the park lights in the distance, which was exactly the right place and exactly the right time, even if no one would have planned it that way. They sat on the copper kettle's back steps for the rest of the evening, not because they had to be anywhere, but because some places are too important to leave in a hurry. The cooperative launched 14 months later, 16 local food vendors, 31 delivery workers across 4 neighborhoods, real insurance, real time off, a retirement plan Faye had designed herself from the notebook she'd carried for 3 years. Florence Whitmore was at the ribbon cutting, elegant in cream, telling the story of a pearl necklace to anyone willing to listen. And every morning, without fail, Faye Collier still talked to Winnie on the way to work. Some habits are too good to break.